Now, typically what I do, and I'll be able to send everybody this this customer avatar sheet is what we call it. But typically what I'm doing, and some of you guys may not necessarily need to do this because you might be a bit more advanced and you may already know a lot about your avatar. So it may not necessarily might not be necessary, but it may be a good refresher for you because a lot of what we're doing when we're creating ads, we're creating stories. We use a lot of story-based, as a bunch of these examples I've shown you guys. We use a lot of story-based. We use education-based stuff. Obviously, even with product demos, what are the main features? Like we were talking about Brett's software. I was like, depending on who you're targeting, like an advanced market, they're going to be feature-driven. But, the newer market are going to be, they may want to know features, but they only maybe want to know like the main ones. So these are all things that you learn through going through a process of understanding who your customer is. And this document is just kind of like a step-by-step process that we can go through. And I don't have time to really go through all of it. Actually, I never intended on us to go through the whole thing, but I just want to give you guys an idea of how this works. And this is an exercise that y'all can take and actually do for yourself. And from this alone, it's a tedious process. Sometimes it takes a couple hours to do this. Depending on who you are, it could take maybe longer. But especially if you're really kind of early and you really just don't know a lot about your prospects, you got to do the research. You got to go find forums where people hang out and, groups on Facebook and like all of these different ways to try to really understand. So step one, you try to write out as much information as you can about them. And I'm talking literally everything because an avatar is not, you're not creating an avatar based on generalizations. You're creating an avatar almost as if your ideal prospect was sitting right here, how would you describe them? Their age, what they look like, their gender, their ethnicity, where they live, how many kids they got, their career, like all of this stuff. Because a lot of times when we're creating these stories, we're creating them to a specific person. It's almost like we have a vision of a person that we're looking at and we're talking to that person. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to talk to a very specific individual. Now, some companies, you can have multiple avatars, right? But if you kind of just early on, I don't believe you should try to go after multiple different avatars at first, because what's going to happen is the data that you're collecting is going to be spread out. And it's going to be more difficult to make decisions on that because you're looking at this and this and this and this, and then you end up all over the place. So what I recommend is starting with one. That way, once you figure out a message that you really dialed in on that one, once you can get a lot of traction going, then you can start layering on more. But, more advanced businesses doing bigger numbers, they'll have multiple avatars. Some will sell to men and women or, different race of women or different careers of people and things like that or whatever. But this is basically what this exercise is. You do that. You try to get in on some of like their personal details, which is kind of like just a little deeper level than maybe like step one. And then like step three, it's like, what does their typical day look like, right? What keep them up at night? What makes them worry? What fears do they have? Those type of things. And these are all like just, things that you can think out loud about and try to write down. Now, you don't have to use everything on here. It's just each step in this process is just, these are ideas that you can use to kind of answer these questions. The more of this you do, the better it's going to be because it's going to open up a whole world of all of the different things that you can say and do to create stories that will resonate with your prospects that will ultimately help you actually convert better and get more traction. Step 4 is the one that I like the most, where you kind of list out like the big problems, the number one problem or the top 3 problems that your business solve. I love problem solving type businesses that solve a problem and not necessarily are trying to, sell a vanity thing or whatever the case may be. Even with like impulse buy type stuff, like, if it solves a problem, I like that better because it's easy for me to find a market of people who got a problem and put something in front of them. They're already looking for a solution. I don't have to go and try to create something for them to try to solve some challenge that they may be having. If they got a problem, they probably trying to solve that problem. That's really what I like to do. 5 is then, it's like, what's the worst possible scenario if they don't solve their biggest problem? Because now these are all like talking points that you can talk about in your story, right? And then step 6, what's their best case scenario if they solve that problem? Because now you can tie that into, well, when you use my whatever thing that I'm offering, now you can talk about what that best case scenario look like. You got a question? Yes. Yeah. I'm gonna send it to y'all. And then 7 is like, take all of everything you did in step 1 through 6 and create like a short story. So what end up happening now is, it's not about how good, bad, or indifferent this is. It's just a process. And when you go through this process, you have a baseline to work from. And Tyron, I think he left, so he's not here now. But one of the things that talking with him and he and I have been working together and just getting to understand him and how he functions, and because we partners on some things now and we spend a lot of time together on different stuff. But one of the interesting things that I picked up from him is that I don't think he has a process specifically to do this, but in his mind, he's doing this. And what he's been able to do with his messaging is to hire copywriters and not to tell them and have them create a story for him, but to give them a framework to create a story for him. Y'all pick up what I'm saying, because there's a big difference between I'm going to get someone to create a message for me, or I'm going to give someone a framework to create a message for me. Right? Because it's the same thing with strategy that I talk about. Like, you hire an agency and they create your strategy and they do the execution. I think if you can give someone a framework of what the story ought to be, if you want to hire out. Now, maybe you don't have the resources to hire a copywriter, or anything like that, and you got to do this stuff yourself. That's really what this is. Instead of you winging it, you have a process to kind of go through to get an idea of who you're talking to. Now you have that kind of little short story down here. You can build off of that in so many ways, and I'm going to show you guys a bunch of different ways you can actually do that. But that's basically, in a nutshell, what this whole customer avatar sheet is about. It's like an exercise that you want to go through. And it's not, sometimes I've had instances where I'm staring at this thing and, for like 20 minutes, and I'm just drawing blanks. Now I might have to sit it down and come back to it later. But what'll happen is 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll be like, oh, God, I got some idea, and I got to pull my phone out and write it down, right? And now I can go back and pull from that and add to it. So it might even take longer. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do it at your own pace. But it's a great exercise to do because it really gives you a lot of thought around who you're talking to. That way, when it's time to create story around that, you have some kind of baseline framework to kind of build from, and anybody that you're working with, your team, people you outsource to or what have you, you can give them kind of foundational to work with, and they can take it and run with it. Typically, you're going to get a lot better result when you're doing that. So that's really what this exercise is about. I just kind of want to give a little bit of background on it, kind of how it works, and how you guys should actually be able to use that.